Oh, there we go. Great.
So welcome to this week's Dr. Tech Show. Pauline.
Hi, Sweyn. How are you? How are things in Orkney?
Very good.
What's the weather like? Can you see out the window? What's
Weather
the
is
like
blustery,
today?
not very warm, bright, clouds in the distance, bit of everything today.
Okay. Well, in Birmingham, it's kind of mix 'em, gather 'em. It
So welcome to this week's
started off
show.
warm.
Pauline.
Hi, Sweyn. How are you?
We'll kill that.
Yeah. So it started off warm, and then it got cold, and then it got warm again. We went out for a drive early this morning because our car has been sitting outside our house for 4 months nearly,
Oh, wow.
without being driven. So we thought it was a good idea, since we're taking for an MOT
Did it start?
next week. It started, and we went for like a 30-mile drive just to blow off the emissions.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, that was important. So what have we got in our program today, Sweyn? We've got a mixture of things. It's the start of co-production week, hashtag co-pro week, from the 6th to the 10th of July. And this was started by Sky, the Social Care Institute for Excellence, in 2016, to celebrate the benefits of co-production, share good practice, and promote the contribution of people who use services and carers in developing and carers in developing better public services. So obviously it's pertinent to what we're doing. So it's about working in partnership, equal partnership with people using services, their carers, families, and citizens. And Sky's kind of view is that it offers the chance to transform social care and health provision to a model that offers people really choice and control. And their theme for this year is co-production in a changing world.
Seems like a very sensible theme for the circumstances we're all in at the moment.
Well, I'm sure they were thinking about that before all these circumstances happened, as you do plan ahead. But yeah, it seems very apposite.
So we've got an example of some of the events going on in Oxfordshire.
We have. Well, Co-production Oxfordshire have done a very helpful list of events. They're happening not just in Oxfordshire, but around the country, centering largely around the theme of how people have come together in response to the pandemic. And they're finding new ways of collaborating and supporting one another. And I tweeted earlier on as well a link to a digital exclusion session that's happening in Leeds as part of their contribution to co-production week. And Leeds are doing a whole variety of things, actually. So it's good to look on my Twitter at Pauline Roach and see what they're covering.
Sure. We should say, of course, that John's not with us yet today. He's hoping to join us a bit later on after a medical appointment that he's been attending. So we'll let him talk about that when he comes, if you wish to. But he is on the way, we hope, a bit later on.
Yeah. Because
co-production involving the users of services in their design and also their delivery, it's a relatively new idea. I was surprised how recent it is, since it's kind of become part of the main way in which people do things.
It has certainly become part of the language, hasn't it? That when people go to meetings and talk about wanting to do things better, they generally use the word co-production to describe what they mean. But have you got any examples you can think of where you think there's been real co-production?
I'm so far away in my working life from the actual users of systems that I can't really, I don't really know. I mean, I work in IT, so I tend to work with professional colleagues more than service users. But I know it's certainly a thing that locally we've been taking more seriously in terms of involving people who use services in their review and in their redesign and their implementation.
Yeah. I mean, I know. I mean, I suppose I deal more with people on the front line, and where in my work it's with people in lots of community-led organizations. And I know when they go to meetings with public sector colleagues, the terminology is used, but I'm not sure that everyone has an agreed interpretation of what it means. And I think sometimes people in public services, for good reasons, they're enforce, they're forced to do things in a certain way because of statutory requirements or budgets, obviously, sometimes. They mean well, or they mean to do co-production, but I think it is demanding of people, and not always the easiest thing to implement. And I think that people make good efforts, and certainly there has been some good examples, but it's still a developing area, I think. And like many of these things, it takes a number of years to embed. We've had obviously on previous shows colleagues from Comp and Cradle Connect, who we had last week, talking about their devices, and they certainly seem to have a large element of co-production in their in producing their devices, where they were using user experience, user research to include people who would be using devices at the end of the production to make sure that their experiences and their knowledge was part of the development process. That seemed important to them, didn't it?
It did, and you could really see the effect of that in the design of what they've come up with and are now producing. Whereas some others might have started with a device and thought, well, this would be great for such and such a thing or such and such a thing. Cradle and Comp both seem to really have involved users and their carers in the fundamentals of the design of the product that they've come up with, and I think the results are there to see. Yeah.
So for anybody who's listening who can't remember quite what the Comp and the Cradle were about, the Comp was like an old-fashioned radio is how it looked to me, with one single button where you turn it on and off, and so it allows people living in a care situation to be communicated with, and to communicate with their family and friends by being able to just turn the box on and kind of being in touch with people who were on their list of people who they want to be in touch with. So that was one device, and then the Cradle Connect is more about it's a different looking device. Again, I think there's three elements to the Connect, the Cradle Connect. There was the kind of the router looking type device, a set top device that had a a slider bit that went back and forth. So when the device was in use, the slider was open, and when it was finished being used, then the slider would automatically revert.
Part of taking the call was the automatic revealing of the camera.
Yeah. And also then there was the remote control, very simple remote, with a blue button and a green button. And we talked about
red.
No, exactly. We talked about the fact that it didn't have a red button because in testing, they found that people didn't want to go use a red button because it spelled danger. So they went for a blue button, which people were quite happy to say, no, I don't want to have that call right now, or it doesn't suit me, or whatever. And green was for, yes, I'll take the call now, or make the call. So
yes, I think the psychological impact of how controls and error messages and information messages appear is kind of undervalued in a lot of devices aimed at the general public. There is a real fear sometimes when people see something like fatal error on their screen, that perhaps they think that they've broken something, but it's rarely possible these days, not for the last 30 years or so, that you can really cause serious damage by pressing the wrong button on a computer or on any other device.
And as I referred to before, on family calls that we have with my mum, who's like, over 21, she does get a bit flustered sometimes if the button that she presses, or the links that she presses in an email, for example, don't work immediately. I mean, yes, classic yesterday on a Zoom call. Normally my brother sets it up and it's all ready for the family to just link into on the Sunday. He had emailed me on the Saturday to say he couldn't do it, and could I do it? I didn't get the email, and so when it came to 5 o'clock on Sunday, I hadn't realized that it was me setting it up. So I sent an email quickly to say, here's the link. My sister in Ireland thought she was setting it up, so she sent a link. So there was all this confusion. Finally, we got a third email to say, no, forget all that. Here's the final link. And but my mum was thoroughly confused by this stage and was trying to click on an earlier link. And, you know, so you need to rely then on the time on the email to confirm that's the link, you know, the right email link to press. Anyway, with all the confusion, you know, there was a good 10 minutes lost where she couldn't get onto the call. And then when she did get onto the call on her iPad, the audio took ages to kick in, which is very upsetting, you know. So I was on the landline to her, talking her through, waiting to, you know, she said, will I press another button? I said, no, don't press any more buttons. You know, it will come up. And eventually it did. But it's, you know, when it's, you know, and for many, I'm sure this is the same for many people, especially during this time, it's the high point of the week. Yeah. You're having this family call and you need technology that's very simple and very easy to rely on. And again, so again, we come back to things like Comp and Cradle, where they've done the thinking with people who are going to be the end users, and they've made it very easy. And John was kind of comparing that to, for example, the big players like Facebook Portal and Alexa, where we're not sure about I mean, they must have done some testing, obviously, because they're big organizations and they've had a lot of money to spend on it. But we're not convinced that the testing would have been similar to what the other two.
No, it wouldn't have been as specific for digital inclusion, I guess. It'll have been more general population testing, I would imagine.
Yeah.
I've just seen a fabulous event in the Oxfordshire list of events. Co-production, lessons from the golden age of piracy. Ideal for anyone wishing to integrate co-production into their field of work and wanting a more engaging and fun way to do it. This interactive session will explore what we can learn from one of the earliest co-production movements, Golden Age Pirates. That sounds really intriguing.
Does it tell you any more about it?
There's an Eventbrite link. That's all.
Okay. Well, I think I did tweet the link to that list earlier on. So hopefully listeners will be able to.
That's on Thursday at 3:00.
Okay, great. So we also had information about another thing that's been happening during lockdown, a children's creative work, which forges links with a care home, and this was a link that John sent us as well to an article on the Harrogate Advertiser, where they were talking about. Let me just bring the link up. A creative project using poetry and art to create links with children and care home residents during the coronavirus. And this is a care home in Ripon, where I have received an array of imaginative poems and artwork created by local children to display for residents to lift spirits. And this sounds like wonderful. There's a picture of a young child holding up two pictures that they've obviously painted or kind of created during lockdown, and this is called the Caring Stars Project and led by the charity Intergenerational Music Making and online platform Night Zookeeper, which is a new one to me, which encouraged children to create a short rhyming poem themed around staying positive and spreading hope during lockdown, along with a piece of art accompany their writing. Now, I don't know about you, Sweyn, but I have been in touch with my nephew on Skype during lockdown as well, and it's nothing more than he and his brother, younger brother, enjoy than creating stuff. One thing I've helped him do was he was making a mask, so I've helped him make papier-mâché for the first time. So while he was on Skype on one platform, I was quickly searching to make sure that I had the right recipe for papier-mâché, which I had. Even at my advanced age, and so I was helping him to kind of find the things that he needed to make it: flour and water, and then I tried to get him to get a balloon so he could and paper, of course, and soak the paper in the papier-mâché, then put it on the balloon and let the balloon dry. But one thing I forgot to check with him, and this will help to illustrate that you need to work with your user and explain exactly what to do in a situation like this. I just said use flour, and the first flour that he came across in his family store cupboard was brown flour. Now, I don't know if you've made papier-mâché recently,
Not recently, no.
But brown flour doesn't give quite the same result as white flour, because there's more elements in it,
bits and
obviously.
pieces in it, yes.
Yes. So I think the papier-mâché was not as
might be more brittle than normal.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. So, but you know, at least it kept him busy for an hour. So
I have to say that that's an unexpected advantage of communicating at a distance. At least it's not your house the papier-mâché is in.
Yes, I think my sister wasn't thrilled with.
I wasn't going to ask.
My. I mean, she was thrilled that we were spending time together, as we both were. But yeah, my instructions could have been better. So back to this in the Harrogate Advertiser.
Yes.
The care home has displayed the poetry and artwork and received an overwhelmingly positive reaction from residents who were touched by the work. And you know, the manager Sarah Aitken was saying how wonderful it was to see example of intergenerational connection between the children and our residents. The residents and families obviously can't see each other at this time except by Skype or the Facebook portal, which is interesting. They're using the portal in the care home. So it's lovely to have the positive and inspirational posters, and it does. In some ways, it feels also like an example of co-production, where something that was needed by the care home to kind of keep their residents or users entertained and engaged, I suppose, you know, was done by using technology to kind of, you know, keep people together, and then also something, you know, actual, physical, that people could see had been produced.
Sure.
After all this effort. So that was another good one. And we also were talking about the how COVID has impacted health during the COVID-19 pandemic, and there was an article in the BMJ.
Yes, and this article was addressing the question of to what extent digital inclusion or digital exclusion has affected how people have been able to access healthcare and information about the COVID-19 situation. And there are serious issues if you don't have access to the internet. A lot of the information, just basic information about the virus, has been put out mostly on online channels. So those people who haven't been able to access those, or who have difficulties accessing those channels, have been in some cases left kind of nervous and not knowing what to do about the virus. The good news, I suppose, is that the figure for people who haven't used the internet over the past 3 months or so is 10%. Now, if I'd been asked to guess, I would have guessed a higher percentage than that. So that is perhaps a little bit of silver lining to the cloud of digital exclusion. But it seems to be that the number of people who at least have access to the basics of the internet and have used them occasionally in the last few months, that the number of those people seems to be rising, and hopefully in that case leaving fewer and fewer behind. But those 10%, that is 1 person in 10. So we've got to do something about that too.
We had I had data about the West Midlands that over 88% of people over 16 in the West Midlands had in fact used the internet in the last 3 months. So that's good news.
That is good.
But it's we don't want to leave anybody behind, and we do want to make sure that everybody has a chance to connect and use digital in the way they want to. You know, we don't want to force people into it. And there's plenty of people who, you know, are quite happy to stick to traditional, if you like, or kind of less technical methods of communication. People are still making phone calls to each other. Still, I was talking to somebody yesterday whose mom is does meditation practice, and she's an older lady, and her group of people with whom she does meditation have been quite happy to not use Zoom or any other video calling, just kind of be in touch by phone, make an arrangement to do the meditation at a certain time, 12 o'clock or whatever, and then just do it knowing that elsewhere in the world, in their neighborhood or in their town, people are also meditating, so that they're doing what they need to do with the minimum technical involvement.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose we shouldn't assume that the 90% who have used the internet one or more times in the last 3 months are confident and happy and have everything that they need. So there'll be a spectrum of need there, and it certainly is in a situation like the COVID-19 pandemic that really some of these issues come to the fore and become very obvious.
Yeah, I mean the BMJ article does point out that digital exclusion can be for various reasons. They might not be able to afford a device, they might not be able to afford data, they might not have access to Wi-Fi. I know a lot of people will have been in the kind of pre-COVID times will have been using public Wi-Fi, like in a library or a public building, or somewhere else, or somebody else's home maybe. And so not being able to access that will mean that digital exclusion is an issue for them. Also, that the article points out that the exclusion is significantly influenced by income, language, literacy, culture, and ethnicity. And we can't forget, that, for example, particular groups such as migrants and Gypsy, Roma, and traveller communities would be particularly affected by this, and people experiencing homelessness, of course. Again, a lot of homeless people would have used libraries, public libraries, as a place to do their connections.
Yes, I think the closure of public libraries will have affected a lot of people for whom they are a great lifeline, both in terms of somewhere to go and see people and to socialize, but also to get access to technology.
Absolutely, yeah. And again, through my work as a journalist and information professional, I've been in touch with people in public libraries who are have been very affected and very concerned, and they're concerned obviously for their beneficiaries as well as for themselves. And at the moment, there doesn't seem to be an overall clear plan about reopening public libraries, and kind of keeping in mind the need to keep staff and users safe.
Sure, it's a tricky one.
Yeah.
I mean, the public library buildings vary so greatly in their layout and the scale of the space that they have, and all that sort of stuff. We're very lucky in Orkney to have the Orkney Library and Archive. It is doing lots of online things at the moment, but like everywhere else, it's not actually physically open. So that place, it's one of the few places that you can just go and be a library.
Yeah.
And certainly since the new library was built here to replace the 1902 building that was used until about 10 or 15 years ago, certainly the new library provides this fantastic space with just incidental access to stuff that is just there's nowhere else like it. There's very few places apart from a library where you can go to spend time and not be expected to spend money.
Absolutely.
It's almost unique in that regard.
It certainly is, yeah. And public librarians are very aware of that, and that they are performing services that are much broader than libraries in the kind of the old days. They're much more places of community gatherings. They provide multiple services that people don't even dream about. The Public Library News, for example, is a great I think it's online as well as it's an online service that talks about the great amount of services that are provided by public libraries, and as well as within public libraries you get children's librarians as well, who are children's library staff who are providing services to children that kind of wouldn't have been dreamt about when I was a child. When I was growing up, the highlight of my month was the fortnightly visit by the mobile library to the village, which is where I grew my love of books and reading. And I was delighted to be able to borrow 2 books a week, 2 books a fortnight. But when the library was there, parked up outside the school, I was there the whole time reading, desperately trying to, make as much of the time as I had. And I know there are lots of mobile libraries still serving, kind of areas not so remote. Birmingham has its own set of mobile libraries, which are were still in operation. I don't know if there are at the moment, but I know they have been making efforts to do. And there's a guy online, what's his name, Libraries Hacked, who has done a list of mobile libraries, and they're he's trying to make sure that people using open data can see clearly where their local mobile library might be. And another great thing about libraries is that, well, certainly in Birmingham, you can borrow material from one library and return it to any other library. So it means you can use not just your local facilities and the local kind of treasures that are in your local library, but also those in libraries that you just happen to be visiting in a different other area. And the library itself then arranges for the material to be returned to its library of origin.
No, that's great. I must say I use our public library just kind of social space at lunchtime. Sometimes, particularly if I've got anything to do online that needs a bit of attention and a bit of quiet away from the office. I know that there's decent Wi-Fi there, and that it's a place that you can just comfortably be and do what you need to do. Yeah,
I mean, I think libraries have been good examples as well of implementing technology to make make it more efficient for the staff that are there to do other things that can't be done easily by machines. So I'm sure in Orkney as well as in Birmingham, they have services where you can return books into a by using a computer, a monitor, to scan your books in and put them in a holder that just kind of gets taken away, and then the book get reshelved at the end of the day or at another time. And that obviously frees up staff to do more more intensive kind of person-centered stuff.
And there's a lot of digital inclusion work has happened in libraries over the past 5 or 10 years. And it's been a really great expansion of what they do, and there's even been some funding for it at some times. But librarians are very good at taking things like that up and making them work. They've got that easier relationship with people as well, usually. They know how to communicate with all sorts of different people.
Absolutely. I mean, when I was at library school, one of the first things that you learn how to do was a reference interview, which means that when somebody comes into the library and says, I want a book about dogs, you kind of go behind that query and you say, well, what, do you know any books that you might want, or what is it about dogs that you want? And it's actually what they want to know is, my greyhound has a thorn in its paw, and how can I make sure that doesn't happen again? This sort of you delve more deeply, and then you also have the classic, it had a red cover. Someone comes in and wants a book, the red cover, and librarians have
it's about ships and it's got a red cover.
Librarians have joked about that, and they do sometimes have been known to put collections of books with particular color covers together to say, there you go, look in that section. But obviously more often it's because they know their stock and they are involved with the choosing of it. And people think who don't know much about libraries think that it's kind of not magic exactly, but that it's just coincidence that books that they find interesting are in the
happen to
library.
Be there, ready for borrowing. Yes.
When in fact, you study for years to do book selection, and there's a science to it, and you do, look at data to look at what people are borrowing, what's most popular among certain age groups, certain ethnicities, certain groups with LGBTQI, for example, you have sections in the library to make sure that people, that all sections of the community are catered for. And there is science to it, and it's great to see when that works, and people just accept it. Then they get used to it, and they come to expect it, even, which is what a good service is, I suppose. That that they can expect it because it does work properly.
I think the area of work that certainly the Orkney Library, I'm sure all other libraries are similar nowadays too, is they have vast availability of online of ebooks.
Yeah.
So of course all that's still been going on just as normal, really, because you don't have to actually physically go to the library to borrow ebooks. But it is just this business of a social space that's missing, and I think some people will be feeling that quite keenly.
Yeah, I'd be interested, maybe for a future show, to get somebody on to talk about the use of ebooks during lockdown, because you know, even though a book is available as an ebook, it doesn't mean there's multiple copies available. There might be just one or two, and you still have to wait until someone else has finished reading it. You know, have been known to load, you know, the maximum number of ebooks onto my tablet, and then not get around to them and feel bad about it. But the great thing again about digital and libraries is that you can go back and check what books you had out before, and you know, so if you haven't quite finished the book that you were reading, you can go back to it. And with ebooks, it'll take, you know, if you've got this, use it on the same device, it'll take you back to the exact spot where you finish reading it. You don't have to be going through it to find the space, or leave a marker in, like and people have used amazing things as bookmarks. You know, food has been used. Rashers. I've heard terrible stories.
Bacon rashers. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Money. Not that often, but yeah. So interesting things are used. So an ebook does lend a certain amount of convenience to that.
I must say, personally, I've not really embraced ebooks at all. I read quite a few books, but I've stuck fairly doggedly to the actual book nature reading. But then I quite often I'm quite late to embrace new technology, despite working in the field I do.
Well, of course, and my information professional friends wouldn't forgive me if I just let it run that books are the only thing that you can get in libraries. Obviously, there are so many other things you can borrow from libraries. You know, the latest magazines, old material that, you know, would have gone out of print elsewhere, newspapers, pictures, you know, car manuals. Some libraries. When I was at library school, I did a project on toy libraries.
Yes.
I don't know how popular they still are, but I know in those days, you know, you could borrow toys in libraries. And I did a project that looked at Tower Hamlets as an example of a place where toy libraries were being developed and were very popular. And of course, there's equipment libraries now as well, and maker spaces, and lots of libraries also provide a makerspace for people.
Yes.
Have you much experience with makerspaces?
Makerspaces, not much. That I know of an organisation in Murray, near Aberdeen, that is mobilised their makerspace community to make PPE for the NHS and care homes and things. So that they've done lots of design work and lots of actual production of the stuff for care homes, and I think for schools as well. It's a makerspace focused around members of an astronomy club in Murray, and they've been doing great work there. I believe that our libraries have 3D printing facilities, but I don't think there's a huge number of people around that actually using that for anything specific.
Interesting, yeah. I don't know that our library, our library of Birmingham, the main library in Birmingham, has a 3D printer, but it does have lots of other facilities as well as being a library. It's a venue, you know, a place where people go.
Yes.
Because there are fantastic views over the city of Birmingham, obviously. There's even a secret garden. I think it's on the 7th floor, where it is a lovely planted up area, and lots of people go there and have their lunch and just enjoy being outdoors, and have being in such a lovely space, and obviously then the serendipity of being able to enjoy a public space like that and borrow or read material, you know, while you're there. Students use it a lot. You know, community groups use it to run events. clubs of all sorts run there, and it's also built so that it's adjoining straight on to Birmingham Repertory Theatre. So there's great kind of what you call it, osmosis between the two cultural institutions, where people can go to the theatre in the evening, or go to something in a library in the evening, or whatever, or in the day, whatever. They kind of are multi-purpose now. And yeah, people do find it very handy. I mean, it's no secret that the library opening hours were vastly reduced because of cuts, public sector cuts, which is a shame, because a building that could have been much more used has had to cut down, and
terrible waste of an opportunity. Yes,
absolutely. And especially kind of sad about it, it's not open on a Sunday when they get hordes of people coming, and they still do. People don't realise that they just automatically think, well, it's a major public building in Birmingham, it'll be open on a Sunday. And at the moment it's not. So it'd be great to have see that changed. I'm not sure that'll. The government has given now 1.57 billion to the arts. Maybe some of that money will kind of trickle towards such institutions.
Maybe,
yes.
It'd
be good to think that.
I hope so. Yes, our library has a very different life in the summer as to the winter, because in the summertime in Orkney we get lots and lots of cruise liners, or we have until now, who call. And one of the things that happens at ports where cruise liners call is that you find the crew, of which there can be 1,500 people, all from all over the world. When they get to port, they're desperate for two or three things. One is haircuts that are more cost effective than on board. The other is Wi-Fi that doesn't cost anything, unlike on board. And certainly the library gets lots and lots of use from people off ships trying to keep in touch with their families back home. Right. So it's quite an interesting kind of niche requirement that they have to have a couple of hundred extra places just to hang about for people who are trying to contact their families from the other side of the world. So yeah.
We just take it for granted, don't we, now? And but it's still not as all pervasive as Tim Berners-Lee, I think, would have liked.
No, and the financial and economic barriers are very real, and for those who have less money, they're can be very extreme. It's easy to think that everyone has affordable access to what they need, but it's just not the case.
Absolutely. So I'm just looking on Twitter for the hashtags digital inclusion and digital exclusion, because they're not mutually inclusive, obviously. And actually, Bob McGann is writing about this, the BMJ article, and he's pointing out that they're suggesting that an urgent first step to correct the effects of exclusion is by making small changes, which obviously makes sense in an agile environment, which we would promote, I think, to how services operate. So they're suggesting that health services can offer a callback service or free phone numbers, especially when there are long waiting times, and especially when there are interpretation services are needed. And certainly in Birmingham, that would be a classic one where multiple languages are spoken, and you want to make sure that people are benefiting from the whole service.
Yes, I think the idea of making the phone work alongside some of the new digital stuff is very important not to forget about, because people are used to how it works. They tend to be more accessible than online for some people, and as you say, you can bring in third parties like translators or interpreters or whatever.
Certainly. Yeah, I mean, I know there are interpretation services that provide on, interpreting down the phone now as well, and also BSL services, not forgetting, people for whom British Sign Language would be their main form of communication. I mean, that's obviously very important to be able to see the person when you're doing that. And I think, there's been some kind of humor around the face mask thing, where, if you cover up someone's mouth, obviously, and they lip read, or the person they're talking to or communicating with is lip reading, we all lip read to some extent, actually, but for whom it's critical, then obviously a mask is gonna hide a main channel of communication. So I've seen some masks where people have put a clear section in the mask, or actually I've seen one mask that was all clear, which would seem to be of use to a lot of us as well. I mean, because the facial expression, you don't communicate just using, it's not just what you hear, it's also the facial expression, which is why it's so important when people are making video calls. I think that you at least check in with the camera on, at least at the beginning, even if you turn your camera off later on,
makes a huge difference. I'm sure if it hadn't been for things like Zoom and Teams and so on through this pandemic and through lockdown, a lot of people would have found it an awful lot harder with such a small amount of human contact.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not perfect, and there are things that you miss, but it's been quite a revelation, the extent to which people are prepared to use video when there really is little or no alternative. It's been a very interesting development, really, over the weeks, from the novelty of it back in March through the frustrations with it, and as we all got to grips with how it all works in through April and May, to now it almost seems impossible to imagine a life where you don't 2-3 times a day bring up friendly faces from all over the world on your screen.
Absolutely. And you've in fact instigated one of those friendly connection events, Sweyn. Do you want to tell people a bit about that?
Well, yes, it's a get together on Wednesdays at 4:30 in Zoom so far, and it's just a discussion area for those who are interested either in islands or in digital technology or food or drink or anything like that. And it's just a very informal social gathering to speak about really whatever else comes to mind. Yeah, and it's a thing that I've done on and off in various forms, but the current form is in a Zoom call. So yeah, that's
it's funny, the way Hoover has become synonymous with vacuum cleaner as the product name. My mum yesterday, again, Mum, hi Mum, said, "See you at Zoom." Meaning the 5 o'clock call on a Sunday, So it's become pejorative now, isn't it?
It's a great name. I mean, whoever thought up the name Zoom for this, it would. It's an amazing name. By and large, some frustrations aside, it kind of just works. It's kind of amazing. I mean, the number of times I can think that I've had any serious problem with a Zoom call, it's only one or two.
I have to say though, because I think of Zoom as the family call and kind of work things, and including the program. For other calls where it's friends, occasionally I use my Zoom account, but I'm happier in some ways with WhatsApp video calls, because you can get 4 people in a WhatsApp video call. Google Meet has certainly upped its game, from kind of hangouts that were clunky.
The clunky old hangouts, when they worked, they were great, but they were only great in the sense that Zoom is now perfect nearly.
But they've certainly improved, and I would certainly encourage anybody in the community organization to not worry about getting a paid for Zoom account, but think about using Google Meet or Skype even, which has also, I think, improved its game. Still has some glitches and still has, times when you think,
yes, Skype unfortunately has a limited life now. It is being retired.
Is it?
In favour of Teams, yes. Teams will replace Skype at a certain time. I can't remember the date, but it's within the next year or so.
I didn't know that. That's news. Okay. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, Microsoft, the history of Microsoft and Skype is a long and winding road, and now that they've got very good video capacities within Microsoft Teams, then they've decided to retire Skype. And I'm sure that there will be a kind of Teams Lite version to try and compete with Zoom in the sort of lower end of the market, but there's no sign of that yet.
Right, because I find Teams difficult.
You have to. Teams is great in an environment where there's a support team that has implemented it correctly for your organization. It's not great for an individual or a small organization to use. There's a lot of complexity in getting it set up properly, and there's so many different apps you can use in so many different ways that the out of the box functionality that just happens to land on you when you just install the defaults is hardly ever it's hardly ever suitable for anyone. And that's where Zoom really has done two things that I think Zoom has done fantastically well. What on earth is that? I'll have to kill that as well. Oh, no, that's okay. One is that they've managed brilliantly to prioritize audio over video. You hardly ever get bad audio in a Zoom call, and you can get glitchy audio in Teams. And the other thing that is, it just you download it, you run it, and it just works. Yeah. There's nothing complicated about it. And there's one or two little glitchy things, like always remembering to join with the audio as you join a meeting and all that sort of stuff. A little bit frustrating, but by and large, I think it's one of the best customer-facing apps I've seen for a long time.
That's good. That's good to know. I'm just cognizant as well, actually, as we kind of come towards the last quarter of the show, that this show is going to be repeated on Hope Radio in Birmingham. So if anybody's got any local issues about digital, happening with digital during lockdown, we'd love to hear from you, and include voices on the show. And even as we speak,
on which note we are joined by
our intrepid
Mr.
founder,
John Popham, our leader and supremo of the Dr. Tech show. Seems to be standing on his side.
Yeah. All right, okay.
So we'll just go like that. There we go.
That's more like it.
That's better. How are you, John?
I'm good, thank you. So I've been trying all sorts of sophisticated ways to get in, and I've ended up resorting to my phone.
Well, it's great to see you.
Good to see you too. And I'm sitting on a bench in Leeds City Centre, and it's now starting to rain. So.
Oh no! It's meant to be summer. Oh, it's rain. I'm looking out the window here, and it is raining here as well. So I don't know.
Yes.
So how are you today, John?
I'm good. I've just had official confirmation that I'm cancer-free from my oncologist.
Fabulous.
It was basically, go away, we'll see you in 3 months.
Oh, well, that's always the best kind of doctor's appointment, isn't it?
It certainly is. Yes. But I've got another appointment this afternoon to have my dressing changed on my operation wound. So hanging around in Leeds, trying to kill time, really.
All right.
And keep away from people. I was going to do this from in the hospital. I was going to do this from within the hospital, but I'd have had to wear a mask if I did that. So I thought I'd come outside. And it took me a long while to find anywhere I could sort of park myself.
Right. Well, we're very glad that you did. And talking about Leeds, I tweeted this morning a link to the a session that's part of the Leeds co-production conference on the 8th of July, which is in 2 days' time as we speak now. And the person tweeting was Sarah Fox, who gives her an email address as lmwscoproduction@touchstonesupport.org.uk. Anyway, it's on Twitter if you'd want to follow it back for the full agenda and Eventbrite links. But one of the sessions is on digital inclusion, which obviously is dear to our hearts. Digital inclusion, health inequalities, and the impact of COVID-19, hosted by Healthwatch Leeds and My Forum Central. And they're talking about what tangible actions can we commit to lessen the digital divide and tackle health inequalities together. So I think that would have relevance for people listening to the show, John.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, Leeds is outstanding, really. They have a program called 100% Digital, and what they have done, yeah, they've probably got some way to go in terms of getting everybody online. But I think what they've done is outstanding, and they've got a big commitment to it. I'm sitting in Leeds at the moment. I was trying to pick up the Leeds free Wi-Fi, which is normally pretty good, but for some reason, this little corner I'm sat in, I can't get it. I don't know whether it's still going. But last time, I did live stream an event using the Leeds free Wi-Fi at one point, but at the moment, I'm not getting any of it. Yeah, that sounds very interesting. I'll check that one out later.
Yeah,
on.
I think we should invite Sarah on, actually, because just looking at her Twitter Twitter bio, she's the co-production coordinator for Leeds Mental Wellbeing Service, which sounds something that we'd be very interested in. So yeah, let's see if we can get her on.
Excellent. Yes. I have not been able to tune in so far, so I've not got a clue what you've been talking about. So, I won't butt in unless you particularly want me to answer a question.
No, we've covered the BMJ article about the digital inclusion and kind of the effects on some excluded communities. So while it's great that 90% of people are included, we are also obviously still concerned about the 10% who aren't included, and then obviously communities that might be specifically have exclusion issues would be gypsies, travellers, and Romanese, people from the Roma community, and people who don't have access to Wi-Fi or a device or data. So, it's all very well. We just can't make assumptions, I suppose, that people have all the access that they need. We still need to be thinking about making access more widely available.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I've been sort of shielding as opposed to other members of my family, and I really don't know what it can be, what it could have been like for people who were shielding and didn't have access to the internet.
Yeah,
and I think I've heard stories about people who their only access to the internet is through pay-as-you-go SIM cards, and they couldn't find a way of getting those topped up without going out. So were basically cut off, and of course, of the people who've not got the internet in the first place. And what do you do, really? I mean, you stare at the wall, or if you've got TV, maybe you watch that, but I mean, it only goes so far. Yeah,
and then of course there are particular communities who are locked down all the time, and now it's worse during lockdown. Like prison communities, people in prison. Yes, they've done something they shouldn't have done, and they're being incarcerated for it, but they still deserve to have access to their friends and family. And my understanding is that all prison visits were ceased on the 25th of March, and that not all prisons have video calling facilities. So there are people who I think, and their families obviously are multiply affected by this. So it's been harder for some people.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely.
So I'll tweet a link to Digital Leeds, John, because I've just noticed on Twitter as well, they've added a new section to their resources pages, pulling together links to digital inclusion studies, statistics, toolkits, etc. So those kind of things are very handy, I think, for people like myself to be able to use in lobbying for better services, and yourself and all of us, for better services for everybody. Because obviously what's relevant in that area to one city will be relevant to other places as well.
Sure.
I think that's right. And I think there's from my point of view, there's not enough learning from other people's experiences in digital inclusion. Everybody seems to want to do it their own way. And, there are a number of tried and trusted ways of getting people online. They don't appear to be widely spread. Some of the ways of not getting people online, of turning them off the internet, have been widely spread. That's what we have to counter, really. Yeah.
We talked also about co-production, obviously, because it's the start of co-production week. And we were just comparing, I think, video calling services as well as Zoom sort of things, so Google Meet and WhatsApp calls. So that's two examples.
Yeah, exactly. And they are proliferating now, I think, all the different ways of connecting people together, which is a good thing, although it could be a bad thing. It just could end up confusing people.
Yeah, we obviously want people to have the best the service that's appropriate to them. I mean, because we talked as well about people who have decided, not to kind of use video calling as a way of communicating while in lockdown. And this lady that was a friend, the mom of a friend of mine who does meditation classes. When people can get together face to face. But now all they're doing is arranging to do meditation at the same time by phone, and then just carry on and do the meditation, trusting that the other people in the group are carrying on with that, even though they can't see each other. So yeah.
There must be thousands of yoga and Pilates classes also in various degrees of online cooperation, whether recorded or YouTube videos or Zoom calls or whatever.
Yeah, and lots more added to that since lockdown. Lots of other organizations doing them live. And I suppose when it first started, I assumed that most people would just search on YouTube, find the most popular videos and just use them over and over and over. But people seem to have enjoyed creating new content. And also, I think for some, certainly community-led organizations, it's nicer and better and more reassuring for them to see familiar faces doing these things and not someone they don't know with an accent that's unfamiliar to them or a language that's unfamiliar to them. So
if there's one thing that this whole pandemic has shown, it's the absolute inadequacy of the phrase, you can watch the video afterwards on YouTube. Now, if you miss something and you want to watch something on YouTube, like the Dr. Tech Show, for example, then obviously that's a great idea. But simply relying on that as your method of communicating with the people who you're trying to do things with, it's hopeless. Yeah. It's completely hopeless. It gives no sense of inclusion, no sense of taking part, no sort of added sense of occasion or sociability whatsoever.
I think you're right. I mean, I think live video is one of the reasons why I started Dr. Tech Show, because I think live video is more engaging. I mean, I think we've got some way to go to build a big audience, and actually at the moment most of our audience watches later. But I think live video is engaging, as you say, Pauline. Somebody somebody who's familiar to you is more engaging.
Yeah.
And these are the things we have to learn, really, is that if you want to find out anything on YouTube, you can find it out. But I don't think there's any substitute for being part of an audience that is learning from someone who's familiar to you.
Speaking of learning from someone who's familiar to you, we were talking offline, John, you and I, about Chris Conder. So shout out for Chris Conder and Barn, because it'd be great. I think it's a wonderful sounding operation, and it'd be great, I think, to have Chris on at some stage to if he's happy to come and talk about it. Can you say more about that, John, in the last couple of minutes?
Yeah, hi, Chris. Chris is one of our loyal viewers. Chris is one of the driving forces behind Barn, which is the community cooperative, which has pioneered using volunteers to dig in gigabit connections to remote rural communities. And they not only do that, but Chris herself runs various informal gatherings where they show people how to do various things online. Chris is an old hand at that kind of stuff. So I think it would be really good to have to talk to her about, because she has a particular perspective on these things from her position in a rural community that's gone from having very little connection at all to having some of the fastest connections in the world. And that's been an amazing transformation. And it would be great to have Chris on. So one day, Chris, if you could find time in your amazingly busy schedule to join us, we would love to have you.
Great stuff.
Certainly would. On which note, we're coming up to the time to say goodbye once again for another week. So I will let you all say goodbye, and then we'll end the program. I don't have music this week.
Bye-bye. You have to wave on Zoom, don't you? So bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everybody, and thanks for joining us this week.